Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to Occult Perspectives. So, I just did my first video of the year, probably about 45 minutes ago or so, roughly about that. Talked about the Eighth Sphere. We talked about Madame Blavatsky's new book. But for now, I want to go back to Morals and Dogma and do some catching up there. So I'm excited to jump back into Morals and Dogma. I think this book's amazing. It's one of those books that you can it's one of those books that'll stay on your bookshelf forever. Same with like The Secret Doctrine, like Madame Blavatsky's magnum opus. Those are books that'll stay on the occult shelf, and I'll take with me forever. They'll always come with me wherever we end up moving to, because we don't want to be here too much longer. So let's get into it. Oh, real quick, before we get started though, I was just watching a video, it popped up in my YouTube feed, from a YouTube channel called Your Higher Self. It's all one word. I recommend you go and check that YouTube channel out as well if you have the time. I was just watching a video on how we are not, our thoughts are not us, which is really kind of, bizarre to think about. But when you really think about it, what he's getting at in that video, and even when you say something like in your head, you hear that voice that kind of sounds like you. If you say hello in your head a couple times, go ahead and do that. And it seems like it's you thinking those thoughts, but he's saying that it's not. It's actually the awareness of those thoughts is what he gets into. So none of us are really thinking the thoughts. It's the awareness of us having the thoughts. It's the awareness behind all of these things. We are the awareness of the cosmos. I am not Tyler Smith. I am not this physical body. I'm not even my thoughts or my brain or my mind. I'm the awareness that lies behind it. So go ahead and I forget what that video is called. I'm going to go ahead and try to find the actual video for you in case you want to go ahead and check that out. I think the video is called You Are Not Your Thoughts, though. I just watched this, but I watched it on my phone. Actually, if I go to my watch history, it should be right. It should be in there somewhere. Can I look at my watch history on the computer? I should be able to. My channel. Oh, there it is. History. So the YouTube channel is called Your Higher Self. The video is called You Have Never Thought Anything. There is no thinker, the illusion of the doer. There is no doer, there is no thinker. There is only the awareness that exists behind those things. So try to take that into consideration when you're meditating or when you're having thoughts that are causing you distress. Realize that those things aren't you. It's just you are just the awareness of them. And that we have to shift that focus and that awareness, where we would want to, or just ignore it. He uses the analogy of when somebody like cusses you out or they say something negative in a different language, you have no idea what they're actually saying, but as soon as it's translated and you realize what they're saying, then you get upset. So he's saying really, if you can just let it go and just let it do its thing, just kind of ignore it and don't let it work you up. So I thought that was a pretty neat video. And then just a real quick note too, especially with the new year and everything, I wanted to give a shout out to the two real influences that specifically made me want to start a YouTube channel. Was Damien Eccles. I love Damien. Damien's awesome. Watching his videos on YouTube really inspired me to do this YouTube channel, to create this. And the other one is Esoteric Freemasonry Unveiled. But that guy, that brother, such a good, awesome brother from the videos I've watched, but he hasn't posted anything for like a long time now. I think it's been since before I even started my YouTube channel. So I kind of wonder where he's at and what he's doing, why he hasn't posted any more stuff. But Esoteric Freemasonry Unveiled, because he covers morals and dogma as well, you should definitely go check him out. And he has a couple different videos covering different topics. So just wanted to make that shout out. And let's go ahead and get into Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. If you have not watched the previous videos on Morals and Dogma, I highly recommend that you go back and check those out, because we have done 7 videos on Morals and Dogma now. So this will be Morals and Dogma Part 8. And we are on page, at least in my version of the book, it's this red version of the book. It's page 29 in this book that we're going to start from, because we were at the end of page 28 last time. I think we covered all of page 28. Okay, we'll just start on page 29. Too much reason can lead to cruelty. He goes into that. There's things that reason cannot explain. But we ought not to believe what reason authoritatively denies, that at which the sense of right revolts, that which is absurd or self-contradictory, or at issue with experience or science, or that which degrades the character of the deity and would make him revengeful, malignant, cruel, or unjust. So reason's just part of the equation. We really have to rise above, and we have to have compassion in our hearts. If we're just solely based on reason, like a very analytical scientist, we're going to miss a whole lot of stuff about life. We should not use reason as a cold and calculating way to degrade the character of deity in any way. And then of course this goes with the balancing of the brain hemispheres. You know, you have to balance the logical side, calculating side of the brain with the right brain hemisphere, the creative, the feminine, the passionate side. That which feels emotions rather than thinks, and logic in terms of logic and reason. And it's really the two wedding of these hemispheres that creates the alchemical marriage, which we see symbolized by the hexagram or David's star. Faith is a man's individual faith must be uncontrolled by power, such as governments and stuff. Every man must be able to have his own faith. And it should be a faith, that would bring peace and, tranquility to the human race. And we don't want religions that feed anger and cruelty and injustice. A man's faith is as much his own reason. A man's faith is as much his own as his reason is. Reason belongs to each and every man, too. He has to have the freedom to think as he will. His freedom consists as much in his faith being free as in his will being uncontrolled by power. Men cannot choose what other men believe. There are many examples listed here. All the priests and augurs of Rome or Greece had not the right to require Cicero or Socrates to believe in the absurd mythology of the vulgar. Taking mythologies and literally believing in them. Same with, even the archangels and ceremonial magic. These are archetypal forces that we have to come to know ourselves, and it's not something we can enforce or impose upon others. Like, oh, you must believe in the archangels, or we're gonna destroy you or disown you or something like that. That's entirely insane. Because the only way you can know any of this anyway is, through experience. Actual experience. Augurs of Rome. I'm going to look up the definition for augurs real quick. I feel like that's a term. I think I'm confusing it. An augur was a priest and official in the classical Roman world. His main role was the practice of augury, the interpretation of the will of the gods by studying the flight of birds. Yeah, I've read about this. I've heard this term elsewhere in Morals and Dogma. Albert Pike makes reference to it. I think there's a couple different references. I can't remember if we talked about the augurs before. He says they're kind of profane a little bit, like it's kind of a crude science, but what they do, an augur was a priest and official in the classical Roman world. His main role was the practice of augury, which is the interpretation of the will of the gods by studying the flight of birds. Determinations were based upon whether they were flying in groups or alone, what noises they made as they flew, the direction of flight, what kind of birds they were, etc. This practice was known as taking the auspices. The augural ceremony and function of the augur was central to any major undertaking in Roman society, public or private. So even like these political leaders would have the augurs do these readings, basically, essentially, for them, including matters of war, commerce, and religion. So they really, respected the opinions of these augurs. Augurs sought the divine will regarding any proposed course of action which might affect Rome's pax fortuna, peace, good fortune, and well-being. Okay. So that's enough on that. Let's get back to the book. And that's one of the things with a book like this is a lot of the times you're going to have to go and like research other things to see what he's talking about, because a lot of the terminology and the language is just so archaic. I feel like I'm so low. I'm going to raise this chair up a little bit. There we go. Maybe that's too much. There we go. It's hard for me to get comfortable in certain chairs sometimes, even though this one's pretty soft and cushy. I have some chronic pain and stuff I deal with sometimes. So yeah, there's that. I try not to let it get in the way of what I do, but it can be a little overwhelming sometimes. So I just try not to focus on it too much. All right, what else do we have here in the notes? Many examples listed here of other men trying to, force people what to believe in. The priests and augurs of Rome or Greece had not the right to require Cicero, as we said before, or Socrates to believe in the absurd mythology of the vulgar. All the imams of Mohammedanism have not the right to require a pagan to believe that Gabriel dictated the Quran to the prophet. If you've watched my videos on Archangel Gabriel, we know that in the mythology, he is the angel who dictated the Quran to Muhammad, and then Muhammad wrote it down. All the Brahmins that ever lived, if assembled in one conclave like the cardinals, could not gain a right to compel a single human being to believe in the Hindu cosmogony. Really, like, the virtue of the teachings that will speak for themselves. So people will know, basically, if you're full of shit, if by what you say, and then through practical application, if they're able to actually, put that, make some sense out of it. He goes on to say, I guess that was the last real example. Except to those, no man or body of men can be infallible and authorized to decide what other men shall believe as to any tenet of faith. Except to those who first receive it, every religion and the truth of all inspired writings depend on human testimony and internal evidences. We just talked about that a lot in the last video, about how it's through internal experience and through internal gnosis, through knowingness, through experience and penetrating the deeper mysteries. That's how we really learn about truth. Testimony and internal evidence is to be judged of by reason and the wise analogies of faith. Each man must necessarily have the right to judge of their truth for himself. So no one should be the judge of that. Internal evidences, I made a note that I like this term. Or this, yeah, the two words of internal evidences. Have the right to be the judge of the truth for himself. Of course, this is in line even with objectivist ethics and stuff, like when we think of like Ayn Rand, individualism. I think individualism is really important, and should be sought after in the spiritual community, because there's too many false gurus and people out there who swindle people for their money, and they're not really about spreading peace and love and truth, actual truth, to try to enlighten people and free their minds. It's more about control and money and power and all these other things. The deification of man leads to disastrous ends. Of course, nobody should claim to be a god, and there were, of course, times in history where this happened. He writes here, Domitian claimed to be the Lord God, and statues and images of him in silver and gold were found throughout the known world. He claimed to be regarded as the god of all men, and according to Suetonius, began his letters thus: Our Lord and God commands that it should be done so and so. It's ridiculous. Anybody claiming to be divine source when they are but a speck or a fragment of that divine source, it's wild. Just the power of the ego is so strong. And formally decreed that no one should address him otherwise, either in writing or by word of mouth. So screw that guy. Whoever he is, I don't even know who he is. So so much for that. Domitian? The name sounds familiar, but doesn't really ring a bell. Palfurius Sura, the philosopher, he was a chief delator, accusing those who refused to recognize his divinity. However much he may have believed in that divinity, had not the right to demand that a single Christian in Rome or the provinces should do the same. So if you're crazy or wacky enough to think that you are God, not that we have the God essence within us, that's different. We have the spark of the divine, and we can move towards source and elevate and raise our consciousness, and become more like God, but we're not God himself, and we can't claim that power over others, and we can't force them to do anything. Really, we should lead by example and seek to educate the society. As we've said before, reason is far from being the only guide in morals or in political science. Love or loving kindness best keep it company. It's that whole left-right brain thing again. To exclude fanaticism, intolerance, and persecution, to all of which a morality too aesthetic and extreme political principles invariably lead. Last paragraph talks about the merging with love and reason for a healthy balance. So now we are on page 30. He's saying to have faith in ourselves and our fellows, to end irrational fears. Irrational fears can eat us alive. We tend to create these dialogues, or these, we play out these things in our mind, and oftentimes they're not even true. It's really just our imagination running wild and rampant. We have to learn to be kind to ourselves. Have faith in ourselves and our fellows. End irrational fear. Not everyone's out to get you. And I added a note here too. You just gotta poke around. It makes me think of the Grateful Dead song, Shakedown Street. That's what that song is called. Can't tell me this heart. What, the lyrics, how do they go? Don't tell me this town ain't got no soul. You just gotta poke around. Or this town ain't got no heart. You just gotta poke around. And that's true. You'll find the Spirit of God. If you poke around and you look around and you start talking to people, you'll start to realize that the world's really not as evil as you think it is. We've all been put in these states of fear, so that we're really clashing against one another. really kind of destroying ourselves. If we cannot put faith in ourselves and in our fellow people, we shall be easily discouraged by reverses, and our ardor cooled by obstacles. Can't listen to reason alone. Force comes more from faith and love, actually, than it does from reason. And I think this has a deep significance about he's getting into something about the deeper mysteries of the universe there, kind of like we talked about in the last video that I just did. I'm talking about Madame Blavatsky. It is by the aid of these, faith and love, that man scales the loftiest heights of morality and becomes the savior and redeemer of a people. Sometimes we need to just be the bigger person and just love. It's the true Christ love, accepting and all of these things. It's not the same as the whole hippie free love thing, though. I've really had to differentiate that with people lately, because that culture, a lot of times the whole love, the free love or the unconditional love of the New Age, not even the real, what I would consider the real New Age movement, because the real New Age movement is like connected with theosophy and stuff. But there's like a false, like darker agenda New Age movement, I think. And it's really just to push people into even a lower form of degradation. This free love kind of thing, it becomes a cover up for really kind of some vicious and dark and nasty stuff. Like, it's really an excuse to be able to get away with some nefarious things. I think that's my opinion anyway. I kind of talked about that a little bit in videos prior. Through the combination of faith and love, and not only reason, does man attain lofty moral heights. Reason holds the helm, but these are the true, motivating power. It's the true motive power. It's the true motor, which keeps the machine running. Without love, if we only had reason, what would be the motivating factor? Without true, genuine love, and we got to learn to forgive people, for their mistakes, as others and God forgive us of our mistakes. That's in the Lord's Prayer. Let us forgive others as, Lord, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom. And this is where the, Ata, Malkuth, Vigbara, Vigdala. I'm sorry. Ata, Malkuth, Vigbara, Vigdala, Leolam, Amen. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Reason must hold the helm, but these supply the motive power. So love and faith are the wings of the soul. Enthusiasm is generally unreasoning. Sometimes when we get worked up and we get excited, and we're like, like a little kid sometimes, As I've gotten older, I've been less like that, But enthusiasm is it's generally unreasoning, so it needs that reason to balance it out. And without it, and love and faith, there would have been no Renzai or Tell or Sidney or any of the great patriots whose names are immortal. I'm not recognizing any of those names, and I don't think I looked them up. There are a lot of different things I've looked up, further information on these subjects, but that one, not really. If the deity had been merely and only all-wise and almighty, he would never have created the universe. What would have been the point of creating the universe if he's just all-wise and almighty and all-powerful? It's because of love. This is the secret of really all the mystery schools. It's the mystery of Freemasonry, is understanding what true love is, what true, martyrdom or sacrifice can be. It's like the whole Christ story. It's like even in Harry Potter, what is the one thing that Voldemort cannot withstand? It's love. Love, he couldn't even touch Harry Potter in the Sorcerer's Stone because of the love of the mother. The love of the mother is like the most powerful force that exists. It's the love of the mother is so boundless that I can forgive pretty much almost anything. and God forgives all. But sometimes there's retribution, or there's things the soul will have to go through after it's done some bad things to learn to not be that way anymore. Even people like Hitler, as atrocious as the things he's responsible for, and a lot of these evil people, that all these deaths and that they're responsible for, in the end, I think there is redemption for them. I think that they might have to go through 20 lifetimes of utterly absolute hell or more, a long, long period of time. But in the end, their souls, can get thrown, all the trash part of what they were, the hate, the injustice, all that stuff goes to the abyss, it goes to the eighth sphere or whatever. But then any essence of them which was true, that was Christ-like, the part of them that they had within themselves when they were a child, that part ultimately is able to ascend. And that's who they really were. But they lost themselves. It's like they became possessed by demons, whether you see that symbolically or literal. And they talk about that in Dante. They talk about, people whose bodies are still here on earth, but they've been overtaken by demons. So literally their soul went on to like purgatory or hell. I think it was hell in this example. But their body was possessed by a demon and still walks the earth, while their soul's not even in the body anymore. It's crazy. Crazy stuff. Genius, force, and wisdom. So we'll go on to the next part. We're still on page 30. In this book, it's page 30. It is genius that gets power, and its prime lieutenants are force and wisdom. Kind of makes me think of the two pillars, mercy and severity. Hokmah is wisdom, which is the left-hand pillar, and the Bina is the top of the right-hand pillar of severity. It's not force, it's severity, but I guess that could be equivalent kind of to force in a way. Strength and understanding. Jachin or Yakin and Boaz, this should all sound familiar. The unruliest of men bend before the leader that has the sense to see and the will to do. Let's see, what did I write in my notes? Development is symbolized by the mallet and chisel. So these are working tools that represent the development of character. They break down, the more negative aspects or components. The world is usually not run by great spirits except in certain circumstances, which is kind of strange. It is genius that rules. The unruliest of men bend before the leader that has the sense to see and the will to do. So even people who are not righteous, they'll still bend to a leader that they can see has the power. They have really, some of these leaders, their personalities are so strong that people just cannot resist them, even if they are unruly. It is genius that rules with a godlike power that unveils with its counselors the hidden human mysteries, cuts asunder with its word the huge knots, and builds up with its words the crumbled ruins. Talks about senseless idols, all this stuff. Altars have been on all the high places and in all the sacred groves. A real leader will basically crumble the ruins or crumble to ruins, the palace of falsehood in a way. Dishonesty and imbecility stand abashed before it. Kind of skip through some of this. Genius is the sun of the political sphere, so the sun symbology, of course, because sun is the outgoing, radiating force. Makes sense for a leader, rather than the energy of the moon is magnetic, it draws in. It's very much the female, divine feminine energy. It takes on. So really a leader needs to be able to do that as well. It needs to take on the burdens of a country or a land or a world. It's not so much about always just being this outward going force that's trying to control everything. It needs to be able to carry that cross, to carry the burdens of the people. Force and wisdom are the ministers of genius, and they are the orbs that carry its light into darkness and answer it with their solid, reflecting truth. Development, as we said before, symbolized by the use of the mallet and chisel. It's the development of the energies and intellect of the individual and the people. So you're chiseling it to the degree, a higher degree of understanding, cutting away that which is superfluous. Genius may place itself at the head of an unintellectual, uneducated, unenergetic nation. But in a free country, to cultivate the intellect of those who elect is the only mode of securing intellect and genius for its rulers. So really, we need to cultivate the intellect of the mass of people. But really, nowadays especially, and it's kind of always been this way, like people don't really treasure like wisdom. Not real wisdom anyway. So glad I didn't end my video. It said I had a low battery. I was afraid it was going to close me out. We won't go too much further anyway, because I've already done. I already did a whole video today, so this will be the second one. We're 31 minutes in, 31:30 just about. Unfortunately, the world is seldom ruled by great spirits, except after dissolution and new birth, in periods of transition and convulsion. So it happens like after the destruction of society, after it's built itself so much, puffed itself up so much in pride, sometimes the destructive aspect of the deity needs to come in, and it's that whole destroyer god, aspect of, sometimes what may seem cruel on our plane of existence, maybe a natural disaster takes out like a country or something, or, a large portion of the world, and a lot of people get hurt, but it's really just on the more macrocosmic level, it's really just the forces, the higher forces, which we can't really perceive the inner workings of, at least not yet, if we're not to that level of perception. Moving, it's like the gear work of the universe. It's moving things in accordance with natural law on the lower plane, so that really, in the end, we can evolve and move forward, but sometimes it requires destruction first. At the end of these destructive phases, that's when we really seem to get good leaders, it seems. Unfortunately, the semi-respectabilities of intellect too often hold the reins of power. And then it seems like as a society builds itself up more and more, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, it just like the corruption of the political sphere just gets like worse and worse and worse, because people become less genuine. When it's not in times of trouble or transition, people get way too comfortable. They get too comfortable, and they don't want to think anymore. They don't want to do anything, and the country, a country dies. A state dies. A state of what? Why is it called a state? You ever think about that? Ooh, we just hit 333. State of consciousness, state of awareness, state. But it's a physical state, like within the country. So I've thought about that a lot too. State. A lot of times I just think it seems to be a state of chaos a lot of the times. But out of chaos comes order. Order out of chaos, as they say. The power of the purse or the sword compared to that of the spirit is poor and contemptible, because money and violence only get you so far. Really, they don't get you anywhere. But yeah, it's not always good to rule with an iron fist. Development is symbolized by mallet and chisel. The world is usually not run by great spirits except in certain circumstances. We just got done talking about that. Moving on to page 31 now, and that will probably be, I'm guessing that'll probably be the last page I cover, because my voice is starting to get a little tired now. I can kind of feel it in my throat. Page 31. We kind of already talked about this. Sometimes Albert Pike kind of reiterates himself in a lot of the parts. A man's intellect will always be his own, held direct from God. The intellect brings a certain power and influence. To knot this power with love is a secret kind of chain that binds all together, or everything together. So let's get into this a little bit. And we see like ownership of different parts of the land. Like I think the land of the world should be like the common, it's the common inheritance of us. Like nobody really owns everything. As we said at the beginning of this video, we aren't even really us. We're just the awareness of this experience. As to lands, you may have agrarian laws and equal partition, but a man's intellect is all his own, held direct from God, and it is an inalienable fief? F-I-E-F? I'm not even sure what that means. See, more archaic language that am not familiar with. So they can take your lands. They can take your food, but they cannot take they cannot take your intellect, cannot take your thoughts, what you think are your thoughts. So really our minds are our own, they belong to us. Or so we think. But no, really, we should really just respect. It's the one, we should all be able to have our own space and our own mind space, mental space to culminate wisdom. And nobody should really be able to take that from us, even if they can take the land, even if they think they can take all these natural resources, the water. Like, nobody owns that stuff. That's ridiculous. It's stupid. Now, I think resources should be, they should be maintained, and they should be preserved in such a way, because remember, physical resources are finite. It's not infinite. The power of source is infinite if you know how to tap into the power, as the adepts do, like in the Madame Blavatsky book. They can manifest stuff out of thin air, essentially. It even talks about that in like the Saint Germain books, where he's being taken through the different realms and stuff, and these higher masters, they know how to manifest gold out of thin air. That's a whole different level of most of us are not in that ballpark yet, but we're getting there. I think those of you who are watching this channel, we're on our way there. Patience, young Padawan. As you get into the hidden chain, I did like this line. It is the most potent of weapons in the hands of a paladin. The intellect. If the people comprehend force in the physical sense, how much more do they reverence the intellectual? He gives a couple of examples. They fall prostrate before it as before an idol. People really do, they recognize and they see and they respect true intellect. The mastery of mind over matter is the only conquest worth having. The other injures both and dissolves at a breath. If you just want to physically conquest things, no, it's about understanding, and it's about teaching, and it's about, mind over matter. My buddy always said, if you don't mind, it don't matter. Mind over matter. He also said, free your mind and your ass will follow. It's kind of true. Sometimes we learn that the hard way. Sometimes we try to wake ourselves up too quick. If there is such a thing. We can kind of sometimes, through the intellectualism, and especially in the occult, you can really kind of like burn yourself out really quick if you try to proceed too quickly. I think it's better to just go one step at a time. Yeah, the physical conquest, it dissolves eventually. Rude as it is, the great cable falls down and snaps at last. And I've always used that metaphor or similar metaphors with society. It's like they just want to live outside of their bounds, beyond their bounds, and they just keep expanding, and it's like a balloon that just keep blowing up, and eventually it's going to pop, because the people just can't take it anymore. They're so enslaved. They're so forced to. And this was the part I was trying to find in that Madame Blavatsky book in the video before, is that people are like forced in this society to always focus on the external. It's always about the outside. We're never, very rarely are we allowed to, society, they don't really promote the idea of going within and realizing that everything you ever need, the real power, is within. It just is. It's how you really come to, realizations, true realizations. Physical conquest, it only dimly resembles the dominion of the Creator. It does not need a subject like that of Peter the Hermit. If the stream be but bright and strong, it will sweep like a springtide to the popular heart. Not in word only, but in intellectual act lies the fascination. So basically, by example, by easily tangible or easily, understood principles and the practicality of them, how they can actually be applied in real life, that's what's really going to show if somebody, with their intellect, whether they should be praised, or not. And people would be drawn to that kind of power. Legislation, the final issue of 1,000,000 minds. I don't even really see that. I put it in my notes. It's the homage to the invisible, the power knotted with love. Is the golden chain let down into the well of truth, or the invisible chain that binds the ranks of mankind together? So the love and the intellect. True intellect, and teaching people is what binds society together. Peter the Hermit, I think I looked him up, and I may have written notes about that later on. He's kind of an interesting character. He has I think he's one of the guys who promoted the Crusades and stuff, so kind of a weird character. Should look more into him. Just Google him real quick. Actually, I'm about to look that up right now, because I don't know whether I really seems like kind of a weird character. I've never been one to. I never really understood the Crusades. I always just thought they were senseless violence. It has something that, it's not just like a religious war. There's something so much deeper about the Crusades. I think it really has to do with the possession of some artifacts or something which really could help or destroy humanity, one or the other. And something about the Holy Lands. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than what they're ever really going to tell you. So the Crusades, I'm sure, had a more esoteric purpose. Yeah, Peter the Hermit, also known as Little Peter, Peter of Amiens, or Peter of Acheres, a Roman Catholic priest and a key figure during the military expedition from France to Jerusalem. To me, it just seems like a bunch of nonsensical violence. Always has. It's one of the key things I've said. Anytime I talk against the church, it's like, man, look at the Crusades, look at all the senseless violence and all this stuff. He was a key figure during the military expedition from France to Jerusalem, known as the People's Crusade and the First Crusade, and the murdering of Jews on the way. The Rhineland massacres. He is by some called Blessed Peter the Hermit, though he has not been beatified in the Catholic Church. So I don't know, he's this dude that went around and preached, tried to get people to go, preach the Crusades. Some claim that Peter the Hermit was the true author and originator of the First Crusade. This is... Various historical sources also recount that during an early visit to Jerusalem sometime before 1096, Jesus appeared to Peter the Hermit in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and bade him preach the crusade. Sounds like he had a encounter with some weird, maybe extraterrestrial or something. I don't know that Jesus would really be preaching that you go kill a whole bunch of people. It's weird. I'm about to Google what was the reason for the Crusades. A series of religious wars between Christians and Muslims started primarily to secure control of the holy sites considered sacred by both groups. Must have something to do with like the ley lines there. The energetic sources that exist there. You know, if you have control of these specific sacred sites or ley line areas, you know, you'll have, you know, massive control over the energies of the earth. And I think all this occult stuff, it's just gone on, these secret wars, these secret like power struggles. It's just all been going on for so long. Like it's insane. And all 8 major crusade expeditions, varying in size, strength, and degree of success, occurred between 1096 and 1291. So yeah. So let's go ahead and finish up this page, and then I will go ahead and end this video. When genius and intellect govern, it will endure, of course. Symbolically transmuting the rough ashlar of society. Society is like, or the rough ashlar, I'm sorry, is like the barbarous society. It's the profane society. Intellect is the only way to make sure the nation maintains freedom. Being held to a higher standard in the spotlight keeps these men from falling into greed, etc. Yeah, when you take political office, you need to be transparent. People need to be able to see who and what you truly are, so they know that you're righteous. Acting righteously. You're not just like having secret councils about like destroying everybody. Influence of man over man is a law of nature, whether it be by a great estate and land or an intellect. It may mean slavery, a deference to the eminent human judgment. It's kind of weird that he would write that. Society hangs spiritually together like the revolving spheres above, as above, so below. You know, everything's connected. It's all one. A free country in which the intellect and genius govern will endure. And as I've said before, you know, I don't think there should be slaves at all, but I do think that people who refuse to do the intellectual work, they don't want to learn, they don't want to grow, they don't want to study any spiritual principles, they don't, you know, they just don't want to learn, they don't want to participate. You know, in Masonry, this is symbolized as the wasp or the drone, rather as the worker bee. The worker bees want to work together, they want to bring society to a higher state, a higher level of consciousness. The drone just wants to destroy, and it's not that righteous energy. But what I was getting with that is that, yeah, the people who do not want to, you know, intellectually help build the world, or they don't want to be a builder of man's mind, they will have to be the physical builders. They will have to be the laborers. I think the ones that should do like the hard labor and stuff like that should be the ones who are like not the scholars, the ones who don't seek to, you know, bring any intelligence or any light to mankind. They only want to like selfishly indulge in you know, just the sensual pleasures of life. Those people are going to be the ones who have to do the physical laboring or the physical manual labor. And then the intellectuals, they can be a part of that as well, but not to the level that the drones, you know, they'll have to be the physical manual laborers, or just do the work that really like nobody, you know, really wants to do. And then if they want to learn, if they want to grow, then they can join that society or that circle of fellows, and you know, try to make some change in the world, whether it be through teaching people intellectually, or, charitable works, trying to help the poor and the needy and all of those things. Those are all righteous things. Okay, so let's see. Is there anything else of importance here? All the nations that have tried to govern themselves by their smallest, or by the incapables, basically people who are not ready for such positions, have come to naught. So they basically break down. Constitutions and laws without genius and intellect to govern will not prevent decay. So basically it'll just rot away. In that case, they have the dry rot and the life dies out of them by degrees. The only way to ensure the freedom of a nation is to provide it with the intellect. The franchise of the intellect is the only sure mode of perpetuating freedom. This compels exertion and generous care for the people from those on the higher seats, and honorable and intelligent allegiance from those below. But as we've said, I don't know if we've even gotten to this part yet in the Albert Pike series, the Morals and Dogma series, but he talks about work. There is no such thing as, there's no such thing as, let's see if I can find that. I know it's in this chapter. Yeah, I don't think we've gotten to that part. Must be later on, so we're going to get to that part eventually. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, this is on page 41, so this is a little ways to go. But let no fellow craft imagine that the work of the lowly and influential is not worth the doing. There is no legal limit to the possible influences of a good deed or a wise word or a generous effort. Nothing is really small. So really these things have an effect, like a ripple effect. Even if you just go and work at a grocery store for a day and you're helping people get their food and stuff, that has major beneficial impacts. Like, don't think that you're too high or too noble or too good, that it's beneath you, so to speak. That's important to remember. So if a nation actually has intellect, it compels exertion and generous care for the people from those who have the higher, seats in the higher office. And then the political public life will protect all men from self-abasement and sensual pursuits, from vulgar acts and low greed, by giving the noble ambition of truly just imperial rule. To elevate the people by teaching loving kindness and wisdom with power to him who teaches best, and so to develop the free state from the rough ashlar. This is the great labor in which Masonry desires to lend a helping hand. So it is the transmutation of society through true love and care, loving kindness and wisdom. And yep, we'll go ahead and end it there. So we're at the top of page 32. So, all right, I've done a lot of talking today on here, and hopefully in the next hour or two, I'll get these videos posted. And once again, thank you everyone for being a part of this channel. There's a couple, I know there's a YouTube short maybe I would like to do relatively soon. I have a tip on those of you who work with the archangels on how to help you visualize them. I found out a trick. If you have trouble visualizing the archangels or seeing the colors associated with them, there's a little trick I do want to share, but I will leave that for a later time. I feel like there's something else I want to maybe do a YouTube short for, or maybe I'll just add it on to another video. But anyway, if you've made it through this video, this one's quite long. We're almost at 55 minutes now. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you're getting something from these videos, and you can take this knowledge and this understanding, and you can pass it on to the others, so that we can all grow in love and peace and prosperity, have an abundance of good virtue and things to share with the world. So take care, everyone. Peace and blessing.